If you look closely at a digital bank balance, it feels like an object that belongs to you. It sits quietly on a screen, waiting to be moved. But if you trace the path of an international transfer, you discover that money never actually moves anywhere. Nothing travels through the undersea cables. What travels is permission. It is a long, polite conversation between institutions that have agreed to trust one another, filtered through a single quiet messaging network headquartered in Belgium. For half a century, this network has functioned as the invisible central nervous system of global trade. We know it as SWIFT. And for most of modern history, to be disconnected from it was to simply cease to exist in the global economy. Sanctions are often pictured as naval blockades or seized cargo ships. In reality, modern power is far less cinematic. Economic sanction is just a line of code updated in a database, telling a network to stop passing messages to a specific address. It works because of a simple, universal law of traditional finance. To prove that you are innocent, compliant, and allowed to trade, you must show everything. You must reveal who you are, where your money came from, who you are sending it to, and what you intend to buy. Compliance has always required total exposure. This requirement created the ultimate geopolitical lever. The power of the state did not come from its ability to stop money. It came from its complete, absolute visibility over the financial map. If you can see every bridge, you can place a guard at every crossing. For decades, this paradigm seemed unbreakable. If an alternative network emerged, it was immediately branded as illicit, simply because privacy was equated with criminality. The choice offered by global powers was absolute. You could have privacy and be an outcast, or you could have economic access and accept total surveillance. There was no third option. Then, a quiet breakthrough occurred in theoretical computer science that quietly erased the foundation of that choice. It did not come from a political revolution or a military conflict. It came from mathematics, specifically from a class of cryptography known as zero-knowledge proofs. At its core, a zero-knowledge proof sounds like an impossibility. It is a mathematical protocol that allows one party to prove to another that a statement is true, without revealing any of the information that makes it true. You can prove you know the password without typing the password. You can prove you are over 21 without showing your birth date. You can prove you possess enough funds to make a purchase without revealing your balance, your bank, or your identity. When applied to the global financial system, this simple capability causes a profound structural collapse in the architecture of state control. Imagine a world where a transaction can arrive at a destination accompanied by a cryptographic proof. This proof mathematically guarantees, beyond any doubt, that the funds did not originate from a sanctioned entity, that the sender is not on a terrorist watch list, that all necessary taxes have been accounted for, and that the transaction obeys every applicable law of the jurisdiction receiving it. Yet, the proof reveals zero names. It reveals zero account numbers. It leaves no trace of the path the money took to get there. The receiving institution checks the math. The math is flawless. The transaction is completely, demonstrably legal. But there is no identity to track. There is no counterparty to flag. There is no ledger entry to freeze. This is where the realization begins to settle in. The sanctions engine of the modern era was not built to enforce law. It was built to leverage visibility. Its strength depended entirely on the fact that compliance and privacy were mutually exclusive. You had to sacrifice one to get the other. But zero-knowledge cryptography decouples compliance from identity. It allows for perfect, automated regulatory adherence without giving up a single byte of human data. When compliance becomes a mathematical property of the transaction itself, rather than a report submitted to a central authority, the entire apparatus of financial coercion quietly loses its grip. Consider what happens to the SWIFT network under these conditions. A nation-state attempts to cut off a rival by blocking its bank identifiers. In response, the target state does not build a clumsy alternative network that can easily be tracked and pressured. Instead, it moves its settlement layer onto protocols powered by zero-knowledge technology. When a transaction occurs, the system generates a proof that satisfies every regulatory rule of the global counterparty, while rendering the identity of the sovereign actor completely invisible. The authority attempting to enforce the sanction is left holding a useless lever. They cannot claim the transaction is illegal, because the mathematical proof verifies that it is legal. They cannot block the origin address, because the origin address does not exist in the message. They cannot pressure the messaging middleman because the middleman has been replaced by open, deterministic math. The weapon has not been broken or smashed. It has been rendered irrelevant. It is like swinging a sword at smoke. For 50 years, global hegemony was maintained by forcing every human economic interaction through a narrow, well-lit corridor. If you wanted to participate in the modern world, you had to walk down that corridor under the watchful gaze of the sovereign guards. Zero-knowledge proofs do not destroy the corridor. They simply turn off the lights, while guaranteeing that everyone walking through it is carrying valid credentials. This creates a deeply unsettling shift in the nature of power. We are moving from a world ruled by institutional discretion to a world ruled by mathematical verification. In the old world, power meant the ability to look at anyone at any time and decide whether they were permitted to exist. In the new world, power is reduced to the ability to define the mathematical rules of the protocol. But once those rules are set, even the creator of the system cannot alter them to target a specific enemy. The protocol treats a superpower and an isolated outcast with the exact same indifferent logic. The geopolitical game changes completely. When visibility disappears, the ability to project power across borders without physical force vanishes with it. Economic sanctions, once the clean, bloodless weapon of choice for dominant nations, become an artifact of an earlier, less sophisticated technological age. If you look around today, the banks still stand. The glass towers in Zurich, London, and New York look unchanged. The news anchors still speak about economic restrictions and frozen assets as if those words carry the same weight they did 20 years ago. The surface of the world looks entirely normal. But beneath that surface, the code has already been written. The mathematics are public. The shift is not waiting for permission from a central bank or a parliament. It is quietly deploying, line by line, smart contract by smart contract, into the foundational layers of global infrastructure. We are entering an era where you can be perfectly compliant with every rule on Earth, while remaining completely invisible to every power on Earth. The panopticon is not being torn down. It is simply being filled with ghosts who hold all the correct keys. And as the old financial empire realizes that its ultimate weapon no longer finds a target, one quiet thought remains to linger in the dark. If your survival in the modern world has always depended on the state's ability to see and approve of everything you do, what happens to you when the state can no longer see anyone at all?